Hello, students. A very warm welcome to all of you. Today, we are going to deal with the next topic that is also referred as one of the organ of the government. Now, when it comes to organs of the government, we know that there are basically three, that is, legislature, executive, and judiciary. So, today we are going to discuss regarding the one of the important organ of the constitution, that is the executive. Now, let's say before moving on to an executive, to whom, or we can say that who are referred as an executive. So, when it comes to the explanation of the term executive, for example, like who is in charge in your school? If an example will be given, okay, like who is in charge of the administration of your school? That means who takes the important decisions in a school or any or in any organization, okay, like some office holder will be there who has to take the decision and implement those decisions, like, so we call this kind of a activity that is related to administration or management. But for administrating also, we need or we require a body, okay, that will take the policy decision or the big decisions and supervise, as well as at the same time coordinate the administrative function. So executive basically is an organ of government that primarily looks after the function of implementation as well as administration, okay, that is referred as a executive. Now it is also one of the branch of the government that is responsible for the implementation of laws and policies adopted by the legislature, whereas at the same time it also is a branch, that is executive is also a branch that extend to the administrative machinery, because we have seen that, for example, there is a formal group, okay, now in that particular group or in organization must have a body that will function as the chief administrator or as the head of that particular organization, who will be holding some offices, okay, who will be implementing the decisions not only in a, you can say, in a administrative purposes, but also who is going to take the decisions in a day to day functioning of that particular organization. So we can refer the word executive as a body of persons that looks after the implementation of the rules and the regulations in a practical manner. Whereas suppose in a case of a government also, okay, so one body may take policy decision and decide about the rules and regulations, while the other one would be in charge of implementing those rules, that whether those rules are getting implemented in a practical manner or not. So the organ of the government, as I've told you that there are three organs of the government, so the organ of the government like executive will be the will be having the responsibility, or for having the primarily looks after the functioning of the implementation and the administration. So next question that arises is that what are the basic or the, you can say, principal function of the executive? Now when it comes to the basic or the principal functions of the executive, okay, we say that executive is the branch of the government which is responsible for the implementation of laws and the policies adopted by the legislature. Now in previous classes I have already informed you all that what are the basic functions of the legislature and the judiciary. So the legislature is one of the organ of the government which makes the law, whereas on the other hand side, executive is the organ which will be looking after the functions related to the implementation and the administration, okay, that is the rules and regulation or the implementation of the laws and the policies which has been adopted by the legislature. Now not only just looking after the implementation of laws and policies, but at the same time executive is often involved in framing of the policies as well. So the official designations, you can say, of the executive vary from one country to another country, okay. Regarding the variation of the executives will come, but first of all let's see that the executive branch, okay, which is there combining the government and the ministers, are basically, you can say, the political executive. Okay, so the executive branch, right, which is there including the government or the head of the governments and the ministers, okay, they are referred as a political executive, okay, who is having the overall responsibility of the government policy. Now this is one hand side, no need to get confused, please listen it very carefully. When it comes to the one of the executive branch, which includes the head of the government and their ministers, okay, will be referred as a political executive, and they are having the overall responsibility of the government policy. Whereas on the other hand side, when the executive branch includes or is not just about president, prime minister, or the other ministers, but it also extends to the administrative machinery. Now, when it comes to administrative machinery, it is basically talking about civil servant. So, civil servants which are there, okay, they are referred as the permanent executive. Once again, please listen it very carefully. On the one hand side, when the executive branch includes the president, prime minister, the head of governments and the other ministers, it will be referred as the political executive, who will be the having the responsibility or the overall responsibility of the government policy. Whereas on the other hand side, the executive branch, which includes the administrative machinery, that is the civil servants, they will be referred as the permanent executive, and the overall responsibility to look after for day to day administration will be the responsibility of the civil servant. Okay, now the next thing that comes up is your different types of executive. Now, as you all remember, before moving on to the discussion of the civil servant, that is political executive and permanent executive, I have told you that the official designations of the executive vary from country to country. Now the question arises is that why don't each and every country have the same type of executive? And that is because due to the nature of executive system in different countries. That means it's not compulsory that every country will have the same type of executive. For example, you may have heard that about the president of the USA and the queen of England, right? Now, when it comes to the USA have a presidential system, right? That means the executive power is there in the hands of the president. Whereas when it comes to the Queen of England, okay, Queen of England is having a parliamentary democracy with constitutional monarchy. Okay, so before moving on to these two topics or these two type of examples related to the different types of executive, let's first see that what are the different types of executive. Now, the slide which is there in front of you, you can also refer your NCERT textbook part 1, that is Indian Constitution, page number 81. You can get the information regarding the types of executive in your NCERT textbook also. Now, when it comes to types of executive, these are basically based on two systems. What are those two systems? First one is the system which is based on the principle of collective leadership. Very important. When it comes to collective leadership, that means more than one person or more than one leader is involved. Whereas on the other hand side, when we can see is the system which is based on the individual leadership. Now, when it comes to collective leadership, we have two variations or two forms. That is your first one, parliamentary. Second one, semi-presidential system. Now let's see first of all what is a parliamentary form of executive. Now when it comes to parliamentary form of executive, the head of the government will be known as the prime minister. That means head of the government is usually known as the prime minister, and it is the prime minister only who is also the leader of the majority party in the legislature. Okay. Third, he is also accountable to the legislature. That means if the prime minister who is there, who is also the leader of the majority party, he must also be accountable and responsible to the legislature at the same time. The head of the state may be monarch or president. Okay, so this is the, you can say, provisions or the conditions which will be there under the parliamentary form of executive. Now let's see the next one, that is semi presidential system. Now when it comes to semi presidential system, has the president as the head of the state. So over here, president is the one who is the head of the state, right? Second is a prime minister as the head of the government. When it comes to the whole state, president is the head, whereas when it comes to the administrative or the head of the government, it is your prime minister. Third point, prime minister and his council of ministers are responsible to the legislature. Okay, so these two are the variations, that is parliamentary and semi-presidential system, which comes under the collective leadership. Now, as I've told you that when it comes to collective leadership, that means more than an individual is involved. So, you have seen that in parliamentary and in semi-presidential, it is both president and the prime minister who is playing an active role in the administrative work as well as in the government purposes. Now let's move on to the second variation, that was system based on individual leadership. Now when it comes to system based on individual leadership, it is referring to presidential type of or presidential form of executive. Now when it comes to, or it is talking about an individual person, so automatically we can get an idea that under presidential type of executive, president is the head of the state, as well as he is also the one who is head of the government too. The president is usually directly elected by the people and he is not accountable to the legislature, right? Now, compare these three types of executive with the example that I have given you regarding the president of the USA and the Queen of England. Now, we have seen that when it comes to USA is having a presidential system of government. Now, when it comes to presidential system of government, I have already informed you that executive power is in the hands of president. Is it clear? Whereas on the other hand side, when we see the Queen Elizabeth or the Queen of England, that is having a parliamentary democracy with constitutional monarchy. Now, as you can see in this particular slide, under the section of parliamentary, there are the last point is which has been mentioned is that head of the state may be monarch or president. So when it comes to the Queen of England, we are talking about a parliamentary democracy with constitutional monarchy. Okay, why? Because we have Queen Elizabeth as the head, right? Whereas at the same time we have the prime minister, that is the Justin Trudeau. Okay, Justin Trudeau is the prime minister of England. So it is having a parliamentary democracy with constitutional monarchy as Queen of England. Is it clear? So these are, you can say, the types of executive which are based on the system of collective leadership and which is based on the system of individual leadership. Now when it comes to, as I've told you, the USA, okay, USA is having a presidential system and all the executive powers are in the hands of the president. Whereas when it comes to Canada, it is having a parliamentary democracy with a constitutional monarchy where the Queen Elizabeth II is the formal chief of the state, whereas the prime minister, that is Justin Trudeau, is the head of the government. Just like this, in France, both the president and the prime minister are a part of the semi-presidential system, right? The president appoints the prime minister as well as the other ministers, but cannot dismiss them as they are responsible to the parliament. So there are different countries having a different or have accepted or having a different type of executive. It's not compulsory that every nation will have the same type of executive. So I hope the concept regarding the types of executive is clear to all of you students. Okay, so this much for today regarding the executive. In our next class we are going to discuss regarding the parliamentary type of executive that we have in India, and also regarding the other types of executive, that is the presidential executive, which comes under individual leadership, as well as the semi-presidential system, which comes under collective leadership. Thank you so much.